Hello everyone, first news update for 18th of May. Now it's about 9 o'clock in the morning Moscow time, and I have bookmarked quite a number of news on some major developments, and hopefully you will find this episode informative, and if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary. Whenever my videos have from 700 to 1000 likes, those videos are shown in recommendations by algorithm. So let's try, maybe we will manage to do it today on this video. Anyways, let me also remind you, dear friends, that this evening at 6 o'clock I will start live stream community chatter program on YouTube channel, and I hope many members of our community join this live stream, because first of all, we can exchange opinion in real time, and I will share additional information that will be reported here in Russia on some major topics, and secondly, I will make some announcements about programming and schedule on my channels. Some interesting, in my opinion, changes are coming, positive ones, and hopefully those changes will help to further develop this project. So I hope many members will join that live stream. That's been said, let's go through some news now. And first of all, I have to report about tragic developments that happened in New York, where according to reports, Mexican Navy vessel that you see on your screen right now collided with the Brooklyn Bridge. And unfortunately, dozens of sailors were injured as a result of this incident, and several sailors died, lost their lives as a result of it. Several sailors are in a critical condition, and of course, medics are providing whatever assistance is necessary to save the lives. Horrifying images from New York. Investigation is underway, and we'll make conclusions what had happened, but it is clear that some error was made, either vessel malfunction or I don't know what happened, but horrifying images from New York. Let's go through some other news, and the Vzglad newspaper is reporting that Lavrov and Rubio discussed U.S. peace plan for Ukraine during the phone conversation. I didn't even knew that the US had any peace plan, really. There was just statements until now, right? No one presented no detailed peace plan, but I guess this is something new that we have to deal with. So in a phone conversation with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, US State Department Secretary Marco Rubio emphasized that Washington views the comprehensive American plan as the key to peace in Ukraine. U.S. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce reported the State Department reported that Rubio and Lavrov discussed the American plan for a peaceful settlement of their situation in Ukraine. Details of their discussion were provided in a written statement by the U.S. Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce. According to her, during the conversation, Rubio positively assessed their agreement on their exchange of prisoners between Russia and Ukraine reached in Istanbul on May 16th. Their diplomat emphasized that their Secretary of State conveyed a strong message from President of US Donald Trump about commitment to achieving a sustainable end to the Russia-Ukrainian conflict. Earlier, the Russian Foreign Ministry reported that Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio discussed during the phone conversation the results of the Istanbul talks and their further steps to exchange prisoners of war. Interesting, yet again, I'm hearing first time that U.S. has any detailed peace plan. Until now, we only hear some statements and they're kind of wishes on part of US leadership, but maybe they did come up with some plan, and that plan was shared with the Russian side, potentially, I don't know. But same time, we have this report from RT that US opposes endless negotiations on Ukraine, and this statement comes from also head of U.S. State Department Marco Rubio. U.S. does not want negotiations between Russia and Ukraine to drag on indefinitely, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said, emphasizing that Washington expects concrete results. He made the remarks after Russia and Ukraine held first talks in 3 years in Istanbul on Friday. The countries agree on a prisoner swap involving 1,000 people on each side and to continue contacts once both parties have prepared detailed ceasefire proposals. On the one hand, we are, and this is quote from Rubio's statement, by the way, on the one hand, we are trying to achieve peace and end very bloody, costly, and destructive war. So there is some element of patience that is required, Rubio said in an interview on Sunday on CBS News. Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan. And also, quote, on the other hand, we don't have time to waste. There are a lot of other things happening in the world that we also need to be paying attention to, so we don't want to be involved in this process of just endless talks. There has to be some progress, some movement forward, he added, and Rubio also said that the US would examine ceasefire proposals from both Russia and Ukraine if those papers have ideas on them that are realistic and rational. Then I think we know we've made progress, he said. And on this matter, dear friends, I mean, more and more often whenever we hear any statements from leadership of collective West countries, me personally, and I guess many of you are struggling to take them seriously because these statements are demonstrating lack of knowledge or education on part of these so-called elites in the West, and also these statements are demonstrating how ill prepared they are for high-level positions. And for example, when Rubio is saying that US is opposing endless negotiations, by saying so, probably he means that some results have to be reached almost immediately or in couple of days or weeks max. I don't know if he, educated enough or not, but I mean, let's take a look at the last big war that US was engaged and how long negotiations took during that war. I'm talking about Vietnam. US aggression against Vietnam. If I remember correctly, negotiations between Vietnamese and North Vietnamese and US delegations took more than 4 years. And these negotiations were taking place in France, right? So 4 years, by the way, more than 4 years. Washington was engaged in negotiations with Vietnamese side while conflict on the ground did not stop. Conflict was carry on, right? Military operations. Yet again, I'm not sure if Rubio knows anything about it, right? But if he was educated enough and prepared enough for this high-level position, then his statements probably would be more serious. I mean, US is running out of patience. This is not a statement that high-ranking officials should say, because who gives a damn about the patience that US has or not? It's not about US patience. It's about sustainable peace, right? Anyways, dear friends, it is just, unfortunate, truly unfortunate that day in, day out, this high-ranking officials of collectivist countries are demonstrating this ill education and their ill preparedness to be on high-level positions. That's just too bad. But anyways, it's not just Rubio that makes statements that hardly can be taken seriously. U.S. president is also right there because he threatened Russia with crushing sanctions once again. This element of acting in US politics is just too destructive at this point. everyone tries to act tough, everyone tries to present themselves as a sort of a gangsters or mafiosos or something, which is not the way to go. I mean, this is not the way serious people should present themselves and their talk, right? But anyways, it is what it is. We have to deal with what we have, right? So US President Donald Trump has said Washington will impose new sanctions on Russia if it fails to reach a peace settlement with Ukraine. His remarks came shortly after the two countries had their first direct negotiations since 2022. So instead of issuing some positive statements that, wow, this is great, two sides are finally talking and there is some progress actually, sides managed to agree on, exchanging POWs, 1,000 POWs each, which is a big deal, right? And sides have made agreement to shortly present their written detailed proposals how ceasefire can be reached. So it's there is a positive development, right? That needs to be acknowledged, but instead of that, U.S. president is threatening Russia with more sanctions and basically irritating not just Russian public, not just Russian leadership, but also world community, because this is not the way to go, right? There is too much acting on part of U.S. leadership and the leadership of collective West countries, other countries from Europe, by the way, also, right? It's just too unserious, right? This is bad, man. I don't know what is wrong with these people, but it is what it is. In an interview with aired on Friday, by the way, Fox News anchor Brett Bayer asked Trump whether he would introduce new sanctions on Moscow, and we have his Trump's quote here. Honestly, I will if we are not going to make a deal. The president said, nobody uses leverage better than me. And while saying so, by the way, Trump is clearly demonstrating how ill-informed he is, because clearly, if any one side has any leverage, it's Russia, right? US is losing this proxy war, not Russia. Collective West is losing this proxy war, not Russia. NATO is losing this proxy war, not Russia. So what leverage US president is talking about? I mean, honestly, what leverage US has over Russia? None, literally none, right? They might come up with some another 10, 20, 30, 50,000 sanctions or 150 million sanctions and sanction literally everyone here in Russia. I mean, it's just too nonsensical. All this stuff, by the way, that comes from collective West is just makes no sense whatsoever. And they're destructive, right? Trump added that the US would assess the outcome of Friday's Russia-Ukraine talks in Istanbul. We'll see what happened. It will be crushing for Russia because they are having a hard time with their economy yet again. He is misinformed, right? What hard time with the economy? Russian economy already proved that it can withstand these Western sanctions. Already imposed more than 30,000, right? And more is coming, by the way, because EU is about to impose a 17th package of sanctions, and they are already working on 18th one, for example. The UK will add, obviously, its sanctions, and US will do the same. So, based on what Trump is saying that Russian economy is having a hard time, he is misinformed. His inner circle lies to him. It's just too clear, isn't it? He also argued that his plan to boost domestic oil production would lower global prices, undermining Russia's energy exports. You know what? How many times I have to say, or other people in alternative media, that Russian economy no longer depends heavily on energy exports. Energy is about income from energy sector is about 30%. It's not like 80% for God's sake, or 90%, or 70, or even 50. It's about 30%, by the way. And if Russia will stop exporting any energy whatsoever right now, Russia will still manage to deal with their issues, with consequences. because 30% is doable, by the way. And obviously, I'm now exaggerating because in no circumstances Russia will drop any exports, right, of energy. So misunderstanding on part of U.S. president here, misreading of the objective reality, and I wonder how long this false narrative gonna still be alive in the West when they think that Russia is just a gas station with the nukes. It's not like that, by the way. It was never like that, actually. And it's definitely not like that today, when Russian economy less and less dependent on energy exports. And topic of energy is in the headlines just because Western propaganda is still pushing this crazy narrative that if we, crush oil prices, then, we're gonna harm Russia, and if we crush gas prices, we're gonna harm Russia. They are pushing this narrative. Otherwise, here in Russia itself, in the media, in public, energy sector is not really a topic of discussion much, right? I don't know, man. I don't know. This is just too bad, man. And the more ill-informed leadership of Western countries are, then more inaccurate or mistaken their decisions gonna be, right? There's direct link there. Anyways, let's continue with some more news. And when it comes to threats of sanctions, by the way, it's not just U.S. president, but lawmakers, so-called lawmakers in U.S. are on the very same page, and they are basically jumping out of their socks in demands to impose some more and more sanctions on Russia. And for example, U.S. steps up calls to impose sanctions against Russia. American senators have stepped up calls to impose additional sanctions against Russia after talks between Ukraine and Russia. Representatives in Istanbul, Reuters reports. So, dear friends, do you see this hostility towards Russia is in their genes, I guess. I don't know. They are Russophobes. They've been built like that, I guess, because instead of saying something good, that, wow, it's great that there is direct talks between Moscow and Kiev now, no, they are threatening Russia more. They want more sanctions to be imposed, and they are more and more hostile. Okay, it's not up to us, isn't it, by the way? They will be more hostile, we will react on it, right? But this is just wrong, man. This is just wrong. So US senators on Friday again called on the Congress to impose sanctions on Russia after ceasefire talks between Russia and Ukraine failed to make significant progress, according to these senators. And what they mean by significant progress, I think talks in Istanbul were very positive, very successful, because sides agreed to release 1,000 POWs each, which is a great deal, by the way, isn't it? 1,000 POWs gonna see their families, right? Gonna have a rest, gonna receive psychological support. It's a good stuff. Why these so-called senators are ignoring this? And also both sides, Moscow and Kiev, agree to introduce detailed proposals how to reach ceasefire. And I think next week we will hear some news about this, some updates on that, right? And prisoner exchange might take place also next week, although it is a time-consuming process, isn't it? Because both sides gonna send first their names of their POWs, then another side have to make sure that they are releasing exactly the person that was in this list. They have to find this POW and transfer to place from where they will be then released. So it is time consuming stuff, but because agreement was reached during the negotiations and Moscow and Kiev leadership are agree on that, hopefully before end of next week we will see this exchange taking place, and hopefully already next week we will see some written detailed plans from both sides how to reach a sustainable ceasefire, right? And yet again, instead of be happy, if you really want the escalation, US senators are calling this progress failure and demanding more sanctions, more escalation before Russia. And there are a lot of them, by the way. It's not just one or two senators. According to Reuters, 73 out of 100 legislators in the US Senate support the bill on introducing secondary restrictions, and in the lower house of Congress, 28 out of 135 lawmakers are also on board with this. But I think in a Congress, by the way, number will be significantly higher. But at this point, focus is on Senate, and I have no doubts. That if Trump, because the Republicans have majority in both houses, both chambers, if Trump is on board with these sanctions, I mean, it will take only, I don't know, a couple of days, and they will come up with another 10,000 sanctions, or I don't know, 20,000. What they gonna sanction, really? I mean, these secondary sanctions means what? They're gonna sanction China for cooperating with Russia. It did not work for US already, isn't it? It was Trump's administration that introduced tariffs on China, this 145% tariffs, and eventually it was again Trump's administration that backed off from its own actions and decreased tariffs, right? So US is in no position to sanction China, brother, and US is in no position to sanction India, right? Because India will continue to cooperate with Russia for many reasons, right? And the US is in no position to basically sanction Global South or countries in Africa that are cooperating with Russia, or in the Middle East, by the way. So why these threats, man? I mean, I don't know, man. But anyways, let's continue with some more news. Взгляд newspaper is reporting that State Department admits failure of the Western strategy of exhaustion of Russia. Okay. I mean, on one hand, they are threatening Russia. On the other hand, they are acknowledging that this strategy that they were deploying until now are not really working. So if they understand this, why so much threats towards Russia? Why so much hostility towards Russia? I don't know. It makes no sense, but you know. So Washington has acknowledged their ineffectiveness of the war of attrition strategy against Russia and is now relying on diplomatic efforts to achieve peace in Ukraine, said Morgan Ortagus, deputy special envoy to the US leader. Ortagus noted that the West's previous approach to the conflict based on strategy of exhausting Russia has proven ineffective. She said their previous US administration tried to follow as much as it takes formula, which was a never-winning strategy. Ortagus stressed that this is not a strategy that works against Russia and called such diplomacy as a failure. The diplomat pointed out that Donald Trump's team is now trying to correct their mistakes of previous years despite the difficulties of their peace process. So I don't know, this statement of also high-ranking official of US administration clearly goes against all information that I just said. You know, Trump is threatening Russia in best traditions of Biden's administration. Rubio is making some nonsensical statements. US lawmakers are threatening Russia. And same time, another high-ranking official from State Department says that this strategy that was deployed before is not working. So, guys, just maybe you should have a talk with each other and come up with some one strategy. And maybe US administration can organize somehow that everybody, at least from Republican side, will be on a board with one direction, so that they would not make statements that are contradicting each other. Because I mean, this is just really too bad, man. it demonstrates that there is a chaos in Washington. Clearly, there is some sort of a chaos in Washington, and their internal confrontation that might actually harm US very badly and soon. But anyways, let's continue with some more news. I would agree on statements of this person. Ortega's, I mean, clearly attrition strategy against Russia did not work. And at this point, it really is senseless to try to hide this objective reality. Collective West lost this proxy war against Russia on a battlefield and on a political field also, or geopolitical field, right? They tried to isolate Russia, they failed in that. They tried to defeat Russia on the battlefield, they failed in that. They tried to crush Russian economy, they failed in that. So they failed in every possible direction. So why continue while they are harming their own people and their own economies? Maybe they should really focus more on diplomacy and de-escalation, but yet again, I don't know, one day you are hearing one statements that are kind of positive about, the escalation and diplomacy. On the other hand, I mean, day after, very same US administration or representatives of US are making like numerous threats. What the hell, man? What's going on? Anyways, let's continue. RT is reporting that Trump announces a phone call with Putin. US President Donald Trump has announced he will have a phone call on a Monday, tomorrow, with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. It will focus on stopping the bloodshed, bloodbath between Moscow and Kiev, and trade issues, he said in a post on Truth Social on Saturday. So, okay, tomorrow Trump will call Russian president. They will exchange opinions. But yet again, you see how confusing it is to understand what US administration really wants and where US administration really stands. Because one day they are saying one thing, day after something different. Third day, they are, dismissing everything that they stated before. This is crazy, by the way. I mean, you cannot deal with people with such attitude, I don't know, with such a irresponsible take on the politics. But okay, let them talk. I mean, let US president and Russian president exchange opinions. It might help. Because clearly US president is misinformed, right? When he is saying that Russian economy is experiencing some, hardship and almost crash or something, I mean, he clearly misinformed. He has no idea what's going on in Russia. And I don't think it is a Russian president's job to enlighten Trump, but maybe this conversation will at least help Trump better understand Russia. Maybe, I don't know. But let them talk. Nothing is wrong with that. RIA Novosti is also reporting that according to media reports, Ukrainian officials fear meeting between Russia and US leaders. Ukrainian officials are losing sleep over fears of possible meeting between Russia and US President Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. Telegraph, this is Western media, by the way, reports this meeting between Putin and Trump is the reason Ukrainian officials lose their most sleep. At such a meeting, Putin would have Trump's undivided attention without mediators to defend their interests, the article states. According to a publication, talks of meeting is a humiliation for the leaders of EU countries who were expecting new anti-Russian sanctions from the US, and they still are expecting, and we might see actually anti-Russian sanctions from US, because I just reported, isn't it, that there are constant talks and calls for sanctions against Russia, for additional sanctions from Washington, right? And okay, I mean, interesting news. If Kiev regime is in in frustration and in panic due to potential talks between or face-to-face meeting between Trump and Putin, because they are afraid that certain elements in Trump's administration that are misleading him will be neutralized by this face-to-face meeting, because Russian president will, directly inform Trump about latest developments. Well, okay, that's a good stuff. Let Turkey regime be in a panic, and also globalists, by the way, because it's not just Kyiv regime, obviously. We are talking about globalists that are behind this regime, and globalists controlled governments in Europe, in UK, France, Germany, and others, you name it. You'll be correct. There is only a few exceptions, like Hungary and Slovakia, Serbia, that are not really, at least under direct control of globalists. Rest is theirs. So, okay, interesting news to take in account that EU regime is in a sort of disarray and panic. TASS news agency, meanwhile, is reporting that Russian armed forces liberated at least 6 settlements in their special military operations zone during this week. So Russian units in the special military operations zone liberated 6 settlements over the past week. Defense Ministry of Russian Federation reported. The Russian military department noted that the sand group of forces liberated the settlements of Mikhailovka, Katlirovka, Novoalexandrovka, and Mirolyubovka. This is Donetsk People's Republic. The forces of the West group of troops liberated the settlement of Tarskoe in DPR, Defense Ministry added. And also, Ministry clarified that the troops of the Vostok group are advancing deep into their enemy defenses. They liberated the settlement of Volynaye Pole, also located on the territory of the DPR, Donetsk People's Republic. So significant progress, obviously, and there are more settlements being liberated, by the way. For example, according to latest reports, this settlement, Bogatyr, is under full Russian control. Russian troops are moving forward to liberate Alexeyevka settlement. This is southern western flank of Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration, and Russian troops are advancing in other sectors of the front line. Also, there are progress in Chisovyar direction. Also, recently there was reports that Russian troops established full control of the central parts of the Chisovyar, which is a big deal, of course. If true, I guess it will not take long before battle for Chisovyar finally gonna end. So this is Chisovyar, by the way, and according to reports, this part with the high-rise apartments is liberated by Russian forces now. So let's see if we will receive updates on that in upcoming days. But progress is significant, isn't it? If you read only Western media outlets, if you receive news only from the West, then you will think there is a stalemate and no movement on the line of contact whatsoever, just artillery shelling of each other and drone strikes. But in reality, front line is constantly moving and moving westwards, right? Russian troops are advancing all along the front line, and literally on daily basis we are receiving informations about liberation of this or that settlement. Let's continue with some more news, and RIA Novosti is reporting that second round of presidential elections started in Romania. So the second round of presidential elections has started in Romania. Polling stations have opened in all populated areas of the country at 7 o'clock in the morning. Almost 19,000 polling stations opened their doors. Romanian citizens who live abroad vote for 3 days in a row. Their stations opened for them on May 16. According to the law, the winner is the candidate who receives more than half of their votes of voters included in their lists. Polling stations will close at 2100 hours or 9 o'clock this evening local time, and most likely, by the way, Simeon, opposition candidate, Simeon, who is supported by another opposition candidate who was suspended from elections, calling Georgescu, who won first tour of previous elections, that was suspended. Simeon is about to receive a majority of the votes, George Simeon, and that's going to be a big blow for globalists, by the way. That's going to be a big blow for globalists. Although, because of this, I would not be surprised at all if globalist control regime in Bucharest, by the way, they sound somewhat similar, and sometimes one may make mistake. Budapest is, of course, capital of Hungary. Bucharest is a capital of Romania. So globalist control regime in Bucharest may actually come up with some provocations to either falsify results to make sure of the elections, to make sure that this opposition candidate Simeon will not win the elections, or they might actually suspend the entire results of elections and call for another ones, as it happened after first tour of previous presidential elections that took place about 6 months ago, when Georgescu was attacked by Bucharest, this puppet regime of globalists in Bucharest. So let's see how things gonna develop, by the way. Interesting developments. According to some reports, Brussels is in a panic because if now they have to deal with Budapest and Bratislava, with the leadership of Hungary and Slovakia, then if Simeon will win in a election in Romania, then Brussels is gonna deal with this country also, and they don't want this. So let's see. Interesting to see what is going to happen. Meanwhile, RT is reporting that U.S. Planning to move Palestinians to Libya, according to NBC. Administration of U.S. President Donald Trump is working on a plan to permanently relocate up to 1 million Palestinians from Gaza to Libya, NBC has reported, citing informed sources. The White House has denied their claims. So I don't know, dear friends, who to believe. U.S. President already said previously that he supports ethnic cleansing, but he did not use ethnic cleansing, but that's exactly what this is, isn't it? When you are removing local population from any area and forcing them to relocate somewhere else, that's ethnic cleansing. There is no other way around it. And the US president actually said, isn't it, that Palestinians will be relocated somewhere else. And so maybe NBC has a point in this report, but yet again, White House denies this claim, so therefore we just simply don't know. Russian media did pay attention to this topic, so therefore I'm reporting about it also. And when it comes to Gaza Strip, by the way, unfortunately, more than 150 civilians were killed in a strip over past 24 hours, according to local Ministry of Health. So over their past 24 hours, more than 150 people were killed and approximately 460 injured as a result of Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip, according to the Ministry of Health of the Palestinian enclave. So tragedy continues, by the way. There is a non-stop in hostilities in the area, and there are more and more civilians are dying, and I'm afraid more than 100,000 civilians have been killed already, as Lancet media outlet, medical journal, reported some time ago. And although officially, by the way, since the October 2023, casualty number stands at 53,272, with another 120,000 people being injured. But nobody knows what happened to people under the rubbles, right? The entire area is just decimated, right? With these Israeli strikes And where is the collective West? I wonder. Where is the collective West? Remember, a couple of weeks ago, Russian armed forces strike a point of concentration of Kiev regime's militaries in Sumy, and unfortunately, tragically, number of civilians died as a result of these strikes. Civilians that were nearby after this point of concentration of Kiev regime's forces, and entire Western public figures, politicians, and so-called media went wild, isn't it? Accusing Russia of war crimes and so on. While it was clear that Russian side clearly targeted military point, right? And unfortunately, collateral damage had happened as a result of this strike. And this type of news is coming from Palestine literally on daily basis, when 100, 150, 200 people being killed as a result of Israeli strikes, civilians, by the way. And where is the outrage from the collective West countries? Where? There is none, right? That's how fake, by the way, those people are in the charge of Western countries. They don't really care about people. Never did. Meanwhile, dear friends, obviously one of the topics of discussion in public and in the media here in Russia is, of course, ongoing talks between Washington and Tehran on Iran's nuclear program. And yesterday I posted on my Telegram and Twitter X pages statements of Abbas Araghchi, foreign minister of Iran, who said that Iran will never abandon the hard-earned right to enrichment of uranium for its nuclear reactors. But Trump, by the way, meanwhile, threatens Iran that something bad is going to happen if it does not move quickly. And as I said many times before, I'm 100% convinced, you may disagree with me, by the way, but I'm 100% convinced that US is not honest in these negotiations, not real in these negotiations with Iran. They are just taking time and preparing ground at one day to say, you know what, we tried diplomatically, didn't work, now we have to take action in military terms. That's what is happening. And it's going to be a huge tragedy, by the way. If US will get engaged in a war with Iran, it's going to be a huge tragedy for Middle East and for rest of the world, of course. It will have huge impact on this world, not just the region. And US gonna suffer tremendously from this, 100%. But yet again, US is threatening Iran. On one hand, they are pushing this false narrative that they are engaged in diplomatic talks, but as I predicted, they are coming up with more and more absurd demands from Iran that they know perfectly well Tehran cannot accept. And at one point, US will just walk away, and they will say, "Well, we tried diplomatically. Now let's do it militarily." Trump is on a board with Netanyahu on topic of attacking Iran. I have no doubts about it, by the way. And I don't know why, even in independent media, number of channels, number of commentators are actually believing that Trump wants to de-escalate with Iran, and Trump is distancing himself from Netanyahu. Why this narrative being spread, this false narrative being spread, by the way, while this is not true? I don't know. I don't get it. But I'm afraid in very short time, first US wants to achieve some deal with Russia, by the way. They want to make sure that Russia will not seek revenge on state level when US will get engaged militarily with Iran, right? Because they know how harmful Russia's support for Iran can be for US militaries. And that's why US is in a hurry to achieve some agreement with Russia in terms of de-escalating Ukraine. But yet again, only way Washington might have any guarantees, at least partial guarantees, that on the state level Moscow will not seek revenge on US is to agree on the concessions. Behind the closed doors, okay, but the US has to agree on the concessions, massive concessions before Russia. And I'm talking about trillions, by the way. I'm not talking about billions or tens of billions or hundreds of billions. I'm talking about trillions that US has to pay one way or another, with investments or with this or that. But US will have to agree on massive concessions before Russia. This crime that US committed against Russia while orchestrating coup d'etat in 2014 in Kiev, and then being, provoking the civil war there, and then proxy war against Russia. This crime gonna cost US tremendously. And even if some agreement will be reached between Washington and Moscow, by the way, here in Russia there are plenty of groups, influential, powerful groups, that will never forgive and never forget. And maybe if Moscow will not seek revenge on a state level because of some possible agreements, these groups will seek revenge anyways. So whenever US is gonna get engaged in military actions against any country anywhere in this world, there are gonna be some Russians there that will support locals to do as much harm to US militaries as possible and US interests as possible. And this is gonna last for decades, at least. Because, yet again, no one gonna forgive or forgot. Let's continue, brother. And this is true. I mean, one may not like this, but that's how it is. Would US influential groups in US won't seek revenge if Russia did to US exactly what US did to Russia with this proxy war? If Russia used Mexico as its proxy, for example, and killed 100,000 US citizens, would US not seek revenge? Certain groups, even if Washington will, even if Washington and Moscow would agree on something behind the closed doors, some groups in US, influential groups, will still seek revenge, isn't it? We all know that. And no one should expect that there will be any other way in terms of Russia. Certain groups will seek revenge as long as they exist. It's gonna last tens of years, by the way, decades and decades. RT is reporting, meanwhile, that EU slams UK-US trade deal. So EU trade minister have criticized the UK's trade agreement with the US, warning that the bloc may consider retaliatory measures against Washington unless it secures more favorable terms for the bloc. So, okay, Brussels may be a little jealous that Washington and London had a deal just recently, a couple of weeks ago, which is not really best deal that UK might have. After all, before Trump's tariffs, UK was in a bad position, but still, it's only baseline, some tariffs that UK will pay, while EU is in a more difficult position, and Trump is quite aggressive in regards to EU, right? Every time he speaks about EU, he says that the European Union is taking, abusing basically relationships with US, and they're taking advantage and is not fair. So therefore, I think negotiations between Washington and Brussels is going to be very difficult, and I don't think EU is in a position really to hope for a success or victory in this trade war over the US. I don't see this happening. So it is what it is. After all, US has direct interest in the industrialization of Europe, right? Because majority of companies that are leaving EU are moving into US, right? So therefore, US has no incentive to be nice in this trade war with the Brussels. It is exactly the opposite. More problems US will create for EU, more and more acceleration we will see in terms of the industrialization of Europe. So sides clearly have very different stands, very different interests, and I don't see how they're gonna reach any agreement that will benefit both. It's just not happening. RT is also reporting that being Russia's enemy could cost European allies about $1 trillion, according to studies. Interesting. I think her number is much higher. But European NATO members would face $1 trillion bill over 25 years to replace US military contributions if Washington exited the bloc, according to a study published on Thursday by the British think tank. EU is planning a militarization drive, which it claims is necessary because of alleged Russian threats. Okay. By the way, I think EU already lost trillion with this economical warfare and sanction wars that EU is engaged. And in next 25 years, by the way, EU gonna lose not just trillions and trillions, but EU gonna lose its place on geopolitical arena. In 25 years, by the way, EU will either not exist, and most likely EU will not exist for that time, but leading economies in EU gonna turn into loosely relevant territories of the Eurasian continent. That's what is going to happen, by the way. Only countries in Europe that will manage to avoid their extreme hardship, is countries that will manage to have good working relationships with Russia. That's it, man. No other country will manage to avoid extreme hardship from Europe. This is just inevitable. This is inevitable, right? So it's not just a trillion. I mean, trillion is a very light estimate, and it's only on military terms. But when it comes to economical downfall of EU, I mean, they're gonna lose not just trillions and trillions, but they're gonna lose much more. They're gonna lose their current way of living. Life of standard gonna deteriorate tremendously. And as I said, in 20, 25, 30 years, biggest economies in Europe now gonna turn into loosely relevant or completely irrelevant areas of Eurasian continent. That's their destiny. And this is all due to their Russophobia and xenophobia and their insanity of leadership of their countries there in EU, right? And I'm quite sure hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of Europeans, by the way, citizens of EU member states will try to move to Russia in next 15 to 25, 30 years. I think millions of citizens of European countries will move to Russia, and they will be welcomed, by the way. Hard-working, law-based citizens will be welcomed 100%. And this is it for now. Relatively long update, but hopefully you will find it informative and useful. And if so, please, dear friends, click that like button and leave some commentary, and share video with your friends or information about existence of my channel. If you like my work, if you like my channels and want to help me to save this project, you can assist with donations through PayPal or Boosty, or by subscribing to my Patreon page or page on Boosty, by the way. All the links are on this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. And you can support with crypto also. You can see crypto addresses also under this video. This is it for now, and before I go, let me remind you, dear friends, that at 6 o'clock this evening Moscow time, I'll start live stream community chat on YouTube channel, and I hope many members of our community join. And I have some announcements to make, dear friends. So see you there, and bye for now. Have a wonderful day.